The mahogany conference table at Williams Manufacturing gleamed under the fluorescent lights as I took my seat at the far end, closest to the door. It wasn't an accident that I'd been placed there. For the past 3 years since grandfather's death, I'd occupied the least important chair in what had once been our family boardroom. Uncle Robert sat at the head of the table, occupying grandfather's former position as CEO of Williams Manufacturing, the industrial equipment company that had supported our family for 4 generations. My cousin Bradley sat to his right, having been named Vice President of Operations despite having graduated business school just 18 months ago. Today's board meeting will address the company's expansion into the Southeast markets, Uncle Robert announced to the 12 family members and outside investors assembled around the table. Bradley has prepared a comprehensive analysis of our growth opportunities. I kept my eyes on my notepad, sketching geometric patterns while half listening to the familiar dynamics of family business politics. Before we begin, Bradley said, standing up with the confidence of someone who'd never doubted his place in the family hierarchy, I think we need to address the elephant in the room. He looked directly at me. Emma's continued presence at these board meetings is becoming problematic, Bradley continued. She doesn't understand manufacturing operations, has no relevant business experience, and frankly her questions during meetings demonstrate a fundamental lack of comprehension about how industrial companies operate. Murmurs of agreement rippled around the table. My Aunt Patricia nodded vigorously. My Uncle James looked uncomfortable but didn't disagree. Bradley makes a valid point, Uncle Robert said, adjusting his tie. Emma, I know grandfather included you in his will as a minor shareholder, but board meetings involve complex business decisions that require industry expertise. Family business is above your level, Bradley declared, his voice carrying the theatrical authority he'd learned in his MBA program. Manufacturing operations, supply chain management, industrial sales. These aren't areas where you can contribute meaningfully. Everyone agreed, some nodding, others murmuring approval. Even my own mother, sitting 3 seats away, looked apologetic but didn't contradict her nephew. You work for some consulting firm, Bradley continued, doing project management or administrative support. That's fine work, but it doesn't qualify you to participate in strategic decisions about a $400 million manufacturing company. I nodded quietly, continuing to sketch on my notepad. The patterns were becoming more complex, interlocking circles that formed larger geometric shapes. Furthermore, Uncle Robert added, Emma's 4% shareholding, while generous of your grandfather, doesn't justify taking up space at board meetings where we need to make efficient decisions. I think what everyone's trying to say, Aunt Patricia said with false gentleness, is that maybe it's time for Emma to consider selling her shares back to the family. We could offer fair market value and she could invest the money in something more appropriate for her situation. Like a nice mutual fund, Bradley suggested with barely concealed condescension. Something that doesn't require understanding complex business operations. The conversation continued around me, various family members discussing the logistics of buying out my grandfather's misguided generosity in leaving me shares of a company I supposedly couldn't understand. I finished my geometric sketch and opened my briefcase, withdrawing a manila folder that had been sitting beside my chair throughout the entire meeting. Actually, I said, placing the folder on the table in front of me, before we discuss my shareholding situation, there's something everyone should know. Emma, Uncle Robert said impatiently, we're trying to have a serious business discussion. This is a serious business discussion, I said, opening the folder and removing a document. Phoenix Holdings just acquired the entire company. The room went silent. What did you say? Bradley's voice came out as a whisper. I placed the acquisition documents on the table where everyone could see them. Phoenix Holdings completed the acquisition of Williams Manufacturing 3 days ago. The transaction was finalized yesterday afternoon. Uncle Robert was staring at the papers like they might be written in a foreign language. Emma, that's impossible. No one has made an acquisition offer. Phoenix Holdings has been acquiring shares through private transactions for the past 18 months, I explained calmly. We now own 73% of Williams Manufacturing, giving us controlling interest and full operational authority. Bradley's hands started shaking as he reached for the documents. This can't be legal. We would have known if someone was buying company shares. All transactions were conducted through registered brokers and properly reported to the SEC, I said. The documentation is in perfect order. Aunt Patricia was reading over Bradley's shoulder, her face growing pale. Emma, These documents show Phoenix Holdings as a private equity firm based in Delaware. Correct. But who owns Phoenix Holdings? Uncle Robert demanded. I removed another document from my folder. Phoenix Holdings is a wholly owned subsidiary of Meridian Capital Group, which I founded 4 years ago. The silence that followed was so complete I could hear the air conditioning cycling on. You founded. Uncle Robert couldn't finish the sentence. Meridian Capital Group, I confirmed. We're a private equity firm specializing in manufacturing and industrial operations acquisitions. Williams Manufacturing is our 12th portfolio company. Bradley was staring at me like I'd grown a second head. Emma, you work for a consulting firm. I work for Meridian Capital Group, I corrected, which I founded and where I serve as managing partner. The consulting work you've been dismissing is private equity analysis and acquisition strategy. Mom found her voice. Emma, are you saying you own this company now? Phoenix Holdings owns 73% of Williams Manufacturing. I personally own 89% of Phoenix Holdings. So yes, I effectively control this company. Uncle Robert was frantically reading through the acquisition documents. This shows a purchase price of $340 million for controlling interest. Emma, where did you get $340 million? Meridian Capital Group manages approximately $2.8 billion in assets across various industrial investments, I said. The Williams Manufacturing acquisition was funded through a combination of firm capital and institutional investor partnerships. $2.8 billion? Aunt Patricia's voice came out as a squeak. Our current assets under management, yes. We focus on acquiring underperforming manufacturing companies and optimizing their operations for improved market performance. Bradley was still holding the acquisition papers, his hands visibly trembling. But Emma, this means you've been planning to buy out the family business while sitting in our board meetings. I've been conducting due diligence on Williams Manufacturing as a potential acquisition target, I corrected. Your board meetings provided valuable insight into management decision-making and operational efficiency. You were spying on us, Uncle Robert accused. I was attending board meetings as a legitimate shareholder while also analyzing the company's investment potential. There's no conflict of interest in thorough due diligence. The room erupted in confused voices. Everyone talking at once, asking questions, demanding explanations. Quiet! Uncle Robert shouted and the room fell silent. Emma, explain this situation immediately. Meridian Capital Group identifies manufacturing companies with strong fundamentals but inefficient management, I said. Williams Manufacturing fit our acquisition criteria perfectly. Excellent facilities, skilled workforce, established customer relationships, but declining market share due to poor strategic decision-making. Poor strategic decision-making? Bradley's voice cracked slightly. The Southeast expansion plan you were about to present, for example. Our analysis shows it would cost $47 million and likely result in market share losses due to established competitors and supply chain inefficiencies. But I spent 6 months developing that expansion strategy, Bradley protested. I know. I've been reviewing all internal strategic documents as part of our due diligence process. Uncle Robert was reading more of the acquisition paperwork. Emma, this shows that Phoenix Holdings already controls the board of directors. As of yesterday, yes. Controlling shareholding gives us authority to reconstitute the board and management structure. Meaning what exactly? I removed another document from my folder. Meaning that effective immediately, Williams Manufacturing will operate under new management appointed by Phoenix Holdings. And what happens to current management? Aunt Patricia asked, though her expression suggested she already knew the answer. Uncle Robert, Bradley, and the current senior management team will receive generous severance packages, I said. Phoenix Holdings typically provides 6 months' salary plus healthcare benefits to displaced executives. Displaced executives? Uncle Robert's face was turning red. Emma, this is our family business. For generations of Williams family leadership. Which is precisely why the company has been declining, I said gently. Family businesses often struggle with professional management practices. Nepotism, resistance to change, emotional decision-making, these are common challenges in family-controlled companies. You're firing the entire family from our own company? Bradley asked incredulously. I'm implementing professional management practices that will improve operational efficiency and market competitiveness, I corrected. Some family members may be retained in appropriate roles based on qualifications rather than family relationships. Mom was staring at me in shock. Emma, how long have you been planning this? Meridian Capital Group identified Williams Manufacturing as an acquisition target 14 months ago. We've been building our position gradually to minimize market disruption. While attending our board meetings and pretending to be just another family member, Uncle James said bitterly. While fulfilling my obligations as a shareholder and simultaneously conducting professional investment analysis, I said. Both roles were legitimate. Uncle Robert stood up abruptly, his chair scraping against the floor. Emma, I forbid this acquisition. As CEO of Williams Manufacturing, I reject Phoenix Holdings' takeover attempt. Uncle Robert, you're no longer CEO of Williams Manufacturing, I said calmly. Phoenix Holdings' controlling interest gives us full authority over corporate governance and management appointments. This is illegal, Bradley declared. We'll file lawsuits, challenge the acquisition, force you to reverse these transactions. All acquisition activities were conducted in full compliance with SEC regulations and corporate law, I said. Our legal team includes specialists in private equity transactions and manufacturing industry acquisitions. The documentation has been thoroughly vetted. Aunt Patricia was crying quietly. Emma, this company is our family's legacy. Your grandfather built this business from nothing. Which is exactly why I want to save it, I said. Under current management, Williams Manufacturing was headed for bankruptcy within 3 years. Market share declining, operational costs increasing, strategic planning inadequate for competitive pressures. You're destroying 4 generations of family business, Uncle Robert said, his voice thick with emotion. I'm preserving 4 generations of family business by implementing management practices that will ensure its survival, I corrected. The room fell silent as everyone processed the magnitude of what had just happened. Finally, Bradley spoke. Emma, what happens now? Phoenix Holdings will immediately implement operational improvements. Updated equipment, streamlined production processes, enhanced quality control, expanded customer development, I said. We expect to increase revenue by 35% and profit margins by 22% within 18 months. And what about us? Mom asked quietly. Family members who want to continue working for Williams Manufacturing can apply for positions based on their qualifications, I said. Uncle James has excellent engineering expertise that would be valuable in our operations improvement initiative. Apply for positions? Uncle Robert's voice cracked. In our own family company? In a professionally managed manufacturing company that happens to have been founded by our family, I corrected. Emma, Bradley said, his earlier arrogance completely gone, I need to ask you something. What's that? When you said family business was above my level, were you right? I looked at my cousin who had spent the past hour lecturing me about my lack of business understanding while I controlled the acquisition of his family's company. Bradley, you have potential, I said. Your MBA education provides good theoretical foundation. But you need practical experience in manufacturing operations before you're ready for senior management responsibilities. Meaning Phoenix Holdings would be willing to offer you an entry-level position in our operations management training program. You could learn manufacturing from the ground up while earning your place in company leadership. An entry-level position? Bradley's voice was barely audible. With performance-based advancement opportunities. If you demonstrate competence and leadership capability, there's no reason you couldn't eventually manage significant operations. Uncle Robert sat back down heavily. Emma, I have one question. What's that? Are you happy? Destroying your family's legacy to prove some point about business competence. I looked around the conference room at 12 family members who were processing the reality that their incompetent relative had just acquired their family business. Uncle Robert, I'm not destroying anything. I'm saving a company that was failing under family management and transforming it into a competitive manufacturing operation that can survive for another 4 generations. But at what cost? At the cost of recognizing that family loyalty doesn't substitute for professional competence, I said. Williams Manufacturing needs efficient operations, strategic planning, and competitive market positioning. Those requirements don't change just because the company has been family-owned. Mom finally spoke. Emma, how long have you been running a private equity firm? For years. We started with one acquisition and grew through successful operational improvements and strategic reinvestment. And you never told us? I tried to tell you about Meridian Capital Group. Every time I mentioned private equity work or acquisition analysis, someone said I was playing with spreadsheets or doing administrative support for real investors. The memory of previous dismissals hung in the air. Just like when I tried to explain our manufacturing efficiency analysis, and Bradley said I didn't understand real business operations. I continued. But Emma, Aunt Patricia said, if you're worth hundreds of millions of dollars, why didn't you correct us? Because I wanted to understand Williams Manufacturing's actual operational capabilities before making acquisition decisions, I said. Your board meetings provided valuable insight into management practices and strategic thinking. You were evaluating us, Uncle Robert said with dawning realization. I was conducting due diligence on a potential investment, I confirmed. The fact that it was also my family's company made the analysis more complex, not less thorough. 6 months later, Williams Manufacturing had implemented the operational improvements Phoenix Holdings had promised. Revenue increased by 31%, profit margins improved by 19%, and the company had secured 3 major new contracts in competitive markets. Bradley had accepted the entry-level position in operations management and was learning manufacturing processes from experienced floor supervisors. Uncle James had been hired as senior engineering consultant and was leading the equipment modernization initiative. Uncle Robert had used his severance package to start a small consulting firm helping family businesses transition to professional management practices. At the company's annual shareholder meeting, the first under Phoenix Holdings ownership, I presented the financial results to the board. Williams Manufacturing has achieved operational metrics that exceed projections for efficiency, quality, and customer satisfaction, I reported. The company is positioned for sustainable growth and market expansion. Bradley raised his hand. Emma, can I ask you something? Of course. Do you think the family business is still above my level? I smiled, looking at my cousin who had spent 6 months learning manufacturing operations from the ground up instead of relying on MBA theory and family connections. Bradley, I think you're beginning to understand what family business really requires. Respect for the work, commitment to excellence, and willingness to earn your position through competence rather than inheritance. Does that mean I might eventually manage operations? It means you're learning what management actually involves, I said. Whether you eventually manage operations depends on whether you continue developing the skills and judgment that effective leadership requires. After the meeting, Uncle Robert approached me in the parking lot. Emma, I want to apologize, he said. For dismissing your capabilities, for assuming you couldn't understand our business, for treating you like an outsider in your own family company. Uncle Robert, you were protecting what you thought was best for the family business. No, I was protecting my own position, he said honestly. I was threatened by the idea that someone might understand the business better than I did. Understanding the business and managing it effectively are different skills, I said. You built relationships with customers and maintained operations for years. That experience has value, even if strategic planning wasn't your strongest area. Is there room for that experience in the new Williams Manufacturing? I considered the question. Phoenix Holdings values practical expertise alongside strategic planning. If you're interested, we could discuss a consulting role that uses your customer relationship knowledge. I'd like that very much. Looking back on that board meeting where Bradley had declared family business above my level, I realized that he'd been partially right. Traditional family business practices, based on inheritance rather than competence, had been above my level of tolerance. But professional business management, based on operational efficiency and strategic planning, had been exactly at my level of expertise. The difference was that I'd built my level up to meet the challenge, rather than expecting the challenge to accommodate my limitations.